What's the best way to go around learning lots of different techniques over time? For example, with log, if you want to learn strict press, push press, split jerk, power jerk, should you try and learn and improve them all at once, or should you do different phases? So I believe that doing working in different phases would be great if you've got like a long term goal. So if you're working towards, say, a big comp that's further down the line, and you know that roughly what the comp weight sets and rep. Sorry, what the comp weight would be, and then you can kind of work backwards from the goal. So, say for instance, your log PB is 100 kilos, and you know that you've got 90 for reps coming up in 6 months' time or whatever. Like you know that say 3 to 4, maybe 5 reps will be like a real good target to aim for. So you can kind of work backwards from that. So for someone like myself, like all skill being equal, I'll always go for the most efficient. I'll always go for the most efficient variation. So for me, doing 4 reps, you've got plenty of time to split jerk and recover from the split jerk. So yeah, I'd definitely be working backwards from that. So I'd be thinking, right, in my specific goal, I want to be peaking that kind of split jerk for reps at the end of the, say, 6-month block, 4-month block, whatever, and then you can kind of work backwards from that. So you could phase it, like say you could do say 4 weeks, say 4 to 6 weeks doing like say strict press as your main variation, then move on to 4 to 6 weeks of doing push press as your main variation, 4 to 6 weeks of doing like say a push jerk or a power jerk, and then move over to the split jerk. So I think it would massively depend on where your strengths lie in terms of what approach is more optimal. So say for instance, like your overhead or your log is as good as say your other events in terms of comps, in terms of how many points you're going to get, then maybe like say you 1 to 2 sessions per week will be adequate and optimal to make sure that you're progressing everything at a kind of similar rate. You're not like kind of specializing, I suppose. But if you feel like say your overhead's lagging a little bit and you're wanting to up the frequency, like I'm always a massive advocate of like if you need to fill the gap on something, then practice it more. And but the thing is, obviously, when you practice something more, you obviously have to facilitate, like think about facilitating recovery. You can't just pick an exercise like say a deadlift, for instance, and then go, all right, I want to push my deadlift, so I'm going to go from 1 time a week to 7 days a week, working at the same level. Like you can do it in terms of frequency, but something's got to give, and you've got to peel back and set different objectives. So let me know what you think about what I've said so far, and if you've got an exercise that you feel like you want to train more frequently, and yeah, like say you're learning different kind of angles. Like say for instance, Kian wants to really work on his farmers, for instance. I know that. So that like say if we did farmers every day, like just doing this exactly the same thing, you're just gonna burn out really quickly. But you're gonna have to kind of rotate the intensity and scale back and push on, and on certain things, change the goalposts on certain things, change to like skill goals on certain things. Yeah, so he's done that before. So yeah, the same principle on the overhead stuff. So if you decide that like if you decide that you want to train for more frequently and up the frequency, then you wouldn't need to say necessarily just do these 4 to 6 week phases and then progress through the variations. Like I'm a massive fan, especially if you're aiming to develop skill, or if you're wanting to kind of push a certain lift more than another lift, in just upping the frequency. And I suppose like that's a massive thing that I do in my programming is if someone wants to really push on with something and train 5 times a week, then we can then obviously I'll work the levels out at how we can do this while facilitating recovery. So if you're looking at doing 3 sessions a week, then you could look at, say, for instance, like what I'd maybe do, keeping it dead simple. Say we went for 3 sessions a week using the log for an example. So keeping it as simple as possible: a heavy session, a light session, and somewhere in the middle. So heavy session, what I'd say roughly in working sets, I'd say between 75 and 85%. But you can go heavier for singles and stuff like that, but I wouldn't go much lighter for your heavy session. So the idea in this heavy session where you be focused on maybe your most efficient technique. So this might be like, say, for instance, using the scenario of 6 months down the line, going for the split jerk, like say going heavy on the split jerk, and then you go on your light session where you might be working, say, 40 to 50%, 40 to 55% maybe, where you might actually work stuff like complexes where you're practicing linking the skills together. It might be different variations of cleans. It might be power cleans. It might be hip cleans. It might be beltless cleans. It might be cleans with the belt. It might be viper presses. It might be strict. It might be push presses, power jerks, push jerks, split jerks. Like say all these different variations, just linking together. Like the weight's so light that you can benefit from practicing all these different skills within the same session. So yeah, and I like an objective within that kind of session very often to just go with the flow kind of thing, and just see what feels good. Keep it light. Maybe if you're somebody like me who likes going super heavy or like working at high percentages, like just actually giving yourself a bit of a cap on the light session. So, so say a constraint for somebody like myself or coaching somebody like myself will be like, say, right, you can do as much work as you want, but you've got a 15-minute cap to do it. Or someone like me, it might be a 15-minute cap, and you're not allowed to go over your ceiling 60%. You're not allowed to go over that. You can do as much volume and as much density as you can with the lighter weights, and you'll find if you can plug one of these lighter sessions into your routine. So obviously, if you're somebody that I do your program, then obviously we can talk about this and I can do it. But if you're not somebody who follows my programming, this secondary session is that I've just described. This can be a brilliant way, as long as you don't let your ego get involved and go too heavy. This can be an extra thing where, say, for instance, you're following a program from your coach or following a program that you've got online or whatever. This can be a great way of developing skills by using this principle of working at lower percentages. You can use this principle of complexes and to really benefit. Say it might be right. Well, I push press on log because I really haven't had the exposure of learning to split jerk, and your coach might not be obliged to actually, might not feel that it's going to be a great return just throwing split jerks at you when you haven't even mentioned it to him that you might, him or her, that you might want one day want to learn it. So this is an example of what you could actually throw in safely without kind of going off program, so to speak. You could I love it when my clients like kind of take ownership and say, oh, Josh, right, I've done my program, but as a warm up this week, I threw in 10 minutes practice on exercise X with a view on improving skill and exposure. Or another example would be like I've done my work I've done my working sets, feel good, so I did an extra 10-15 minutes afterwards where I just worked on some skills. So I think it's absolutely brilliant when people do that. So the other session in between, so now we've got, like, say, your heavy session on your most efficient kind of variation. It could be singles, doubles, or whatever on split jerk, and then we've got the lighter session where you're kind of just keeping it varied, going with the flow, being intuitive, see what you fancy. when you do this lighter session, another note on that. So when you do this lighter session, do not be surprised if you feel that as the sets go on, it just gets easier and easier and this is whether you understand what you're doing or not. Like if your exercise gets easier as you go along, this is great feedback that you're developing that efficiency. So the session in the middle, I would. This is where it's kind of you've got to be most careful in my experience, especially someone. I'm just imagining me training here. Like I actually find that an example protocol could be like in the medium range, could be like say 5 sets of 3 at 65 to 80%, say. So if you can picture what your max, say your max log is, you go 5 sets of 3 at 80%, it's pretty tough, but you're not kind of like getting it's not quite top end, so you're getting that kind of, like when you do the heavy session, sometimes you could do the heavy session, and because it's so heavy, you're limiting the volume. You could do like say 4 sets of 2 really, really heavy, and actually feel fine the next day and feel really good because you've not actually done that much volume to fatigue yourself. And then the lighter sessions, like the other way around, like is like you've done quite a bit of work and a bit of practice, but then the load hasn't been enough to fatigue you and your muscles don't feel particularly sore or anything. Whereas in this middle range, it can seem quite innocent on paper because you're not doing such a heavy weight, but because you're doing like kind of moderate volume, it can be very, very easy to do a little bit too much. So yeah, just a little note there on being careful in that zone. Has anybody noticed that when they've trained in that zone where they'd rather almost do some heavy singles or some really, really light work, but then they've been smoked by the stuff in the middle? So let me know if you can relate. So the lighter work connects through in what was an unexpected way. Light axle clean and press really keyed in tech and made it more robust in comp with heavy weights. Exactly, because you can do the volume with the lighter weights, and you say an example. I did the training on Tuesday night, my overhead session. I've been just been going pretty heavy, working like say my Tuesday is my overhead session, and for a while I've been doing like the heavy session that I just described before. Whereas actually, like after a comp recently and just going lighter and just backing off, like what I've done is actually gone with the kind of lighter to moderate kind of weight and like for higher reps. And what I find like working in that zone is like when you're getting deep into the, like I was doing like sets of 8 or something, power clean and push press. So when I'm getting 5 or 6, 7, 8 deep into that set, it actually feels positionally in terms of feedback what I'm getting when I'm going with maximal weights in terms of like the positioning slightly out, and it feels really, really difficult. But the value you're getting is you're getting that exposure to the kind of skill development that you need when you're going really heavy, but then you're doing that, you're getting that same feedback but with a lighter weight. So obviously like afterwards, the day after, and now I just feel great, feel fine. I actually felt like invigorated after the session rather than that kind of neural fatigue that you feel you're accumulating. So yeah, it can be really beneficial way. And also as well, like using myself as an example, I haven't done any power cleans for a while, and I feel like that kind of hip extension is something that I could have like a few times this season. Like have not let me down, but they felt more kind of, I feel like I need to go and put a little bit more money in the bank, so to speak. Like I haven't been practicing cleans in isolation. I can feel that they're not quite as good as they were, say, 18 months ago. So I'm addressing that like in the kind of complex style that I said before. Like I'm thinking, right, well, there's no pressure on comp weights, so I'm going to do the power clean as a variation for a little bit. And then equally as well, I've been going equally a bit higher, Byron. No worries, mate. So because I've been doing split jerk for a while, like because I've been going heavy prepping for comps and stuff, like I actually haven't been using push press that much, which I find that if I do a phase of push press, I go back to any kind of jerk variations, and because I've like optimized my dip and drive and my bar path, like my jerks blow up. So that's obviously a bit of a rationale bit behind what I'm training at the minute. So let's give on to the next thing. So tried and tested 1RM warm up, 5 reps at 70%, 3 reps at 80%, and so on. So let me know what you guys think. How would you usually build up to say for instance you're going for a deadlift PB? Like how would you build up? Say you've got half an hour to build up to your top set. What would you do? So let me know in the comments. So what I would do would be I'd work at whatever the target, say, top set is of the day. So say, for instance, like I'm going for a 90% single on exercise X. Then I'd work backward, or say I'm going for 95%. So I'd work backwards from that. I would work like, say, for instance, like so Byron did it this week. So, well, tell us your strategy, what you did. So I always look at it like if every rep over 90% is really, really costly on it. More specifically on like strength exercises. And what I mean by strength exercise, I mean like, say, powerlifting style stuff, you know, where there's like maximum exertion for a longer period of time, compared to like an explosive lift where you might just be doing you might just be doing the concentric, you know, like say on a jerk, for instance. If somebody's done it, if you say, Kian, you imagine you've done like a split jerk, say a 130 or something, and you catch it right, and it actually feels, and then you dump it. Well, it actually feels easy, doesn't it? You're not actually grinding. So in terms of fatigue, like you can afford to go a little bit heavier on the overhead stuff in terms of warm-ups and working at higher percentages, providing, and this is a big thing, providing that I would definitely recommend, like in comps or when you're building up to a max, like eliminate the eccentric as much as you can. So like any overheads, make sure you can dump it. You don't want to be accumulating eccentric fatigue, because that's where you kind of getting the fatigue from. Because if you think about it, you do like, say, even like an explosive push press or whatever, you do like a power clean and a push press, and you catch it right, and you're not grinding at lockout. It actually feels easy. Like if you do power clean, push press, even up to like 90% or whatever. So that's why you might find that you can actually, if you do work like this, you might actually find that you can accumulate more volume at higher percentages on stuff like overhead lifts, on stuff like, say, bag throw. Think about bag throw, for instance. It's concentric only. So as soon as you release it and finish the extension, you've released it and you're not under tension anymore. So you're not having to lower it down to the ground. Even stuff like, say sprints, prowler sprints, sled drags, like even like truck pull simulation and stuff, you will be able to go pretty heavy on that. And actually, even though that it feels like you're really exerting yourself at the time and you might be getting out of breath, you'll actually be able to work at a higher percentage and recover better, because you're not, like, say, for instance, you're doing a truck pull or whatever, and you just get to the point where you like there's no eccentric fatigue. So what I mean by that simple way is you don't need to put the brakes on. Whereas if you think about you're doing, like, say, squats or deadlifts or bench or strict press or something like that, the tension that you're having to create whilst doing the eccentric is really, really, and that kind of like global neural stimulation that you're having to get, like, is mega intense and really fatigues you. So that's why I would get really confident and skilled in taking bigger jumps on the stuff where there's an eccentric when you're warming up. So stuff like deadlift, squats, and stuff like that. I'd be thinking that anything over 90% is really, really costly. So say you're going for a PB at comp, like say for instance you wanted to say for instance you wanted to pull 300 at a comp in like a powerlifting comp. This was a question that I had the other day for someone who was competing at the deadlift championships, and he wanted to finish on like 280, 285, and he was thinking, right, second lift go 275, opener go 265. And then I explained to him that say anything over 90% is really, really costly. So working backwards from say the 280, ideally I wouldn't be going over 252.5 for someone finishing on a 280. Or say Kian, in you're finishing on 300 at OSG, your last warm up 270 single, or even if you get better before say OSG at taking bigger jumps, and like say if you were confident in terms of skill at hitting 88% of your target, that's gonna, so if you're confident with your technique and you can take those bigger jumps, you're going to get rewarded with kind of that saving more kind of neural, like accumulating less neural fatigue, if you will. Whereas you'll find that newer lifters and more novice lifters feel like they need to go at slightly higher percentages of the max. So because it's like a tug of war between building confidence and actually accumulating fatigue. So that's what you'll find. So as you become more advanced with your lifting, I would definitely aim to get more confident with bigger jumps. As you gain more experience and you're more confident with your technique, you'll see some guys like Andy Bolton, for instance. I'm sure like he'd take like seemingly huge jumps, like 50 kilo jumps in warm ups up to like say high 300s. So yeah, it's definitely a skill. So it's deadlift. I don't really think about percentages. Do a standard 10 reps at 60 every session, just to get moving, feeling okay through the movement. Yeah, spot on. That's what I would do. Do you work with your, like say the lighter work says a lot of people start with 60, a lot of people start with 70, like 25 plate, 20 plate, either side on deadlift, for instance, so it's the right height. And then almost use that to iron out kind of, or find your, this is another thing what you use the warm-up for. We'll use the deadlift, for example. Like you're using those lighter weights, so say 60 kilos for a set of 10, to find your most optimal position on that day. So this is something that I learned from doing, like, say, a high frequency phase where I was deadlifting every day or whatever for like a prolonged period of time. And what I found was that depending on, like, say, the work that I'd done over the course of the training weeks, I found that my optimal deadlift start position changed every single day subtly. So say, for instance, I've been doing stuff where I've been doing, say, some squatting after the light deadlifts, for instance, like a squat session or lower body intense session. I might find that my leg drive is actually really fatigued the next day. So then on that day, I might be more inclined to find a position that actually start with a bit of a higher hip and maybe more slight flexion at the upper spine. And then I might have days where, say, I don't know, like the weekend off and my legs are fresh and feeling good. And I might be able to get like a slightly lower hip position, more kind of flatter back, and feel like I've got plenty of leg drive. So my point is, like obviously you can kind of project this and predict this and with programming. But sometimes it's like, it's inexplicable, like how you feel. Like, how often do you guys feel like when sometimes you train and you might even be going to the gym and you might be feeling great, and then you go to warm up and you're like, oh my goodness, like I can't even get in a good position. Like, and then other times you might actually feel like, oh, I feel really, really fatigued, and then you go to the gym not hoping for much, and like the weights move really good. Has anybody experienced this? Like, let me know in the comments, like if you've experienced this. So my point is that you need to explore every single time that you're in there. And you can do this. There's a perfect way, doing your sets of 10 or whatever, doing your sets of 5 in your case, Kian. And just use that to kind of gauge. What I usually do is I usually use the 120 range to do. Maybe I'll often do, like, say if I'm doing like a big deadlift session, I'll use like 120ish or 120 to 140, and I'll do, like, say, sets of 5, maybe 3 sets of 5, exploring slight different subtle differences in position. It might be like foot width, it might be how turned out my feet are, it might be how low my hips are. And this is a big thing that I suppose what I've just said, that I've never seen actually written down, to be honest. Never read it anywhere. It's just something that I've experienced, where your ideal position does change from day to day. So actually using these really light weights, going back to what we said before, where you kind of almost getting some free training in that's not costly, because it's not costing you anything from your nervous system, and then ramping it up. So yeah, doing something like Ian says about doing a few sets of 5 up to 60%, then triples, doubles, topping out between 85 90%. Yeah, great. So what I would say with this, because everybody is so different, so I can even imagine, like, say, Byron and Kian here warming up. And what I would do, like, if I was coaching you two in person to build up to a 1-repper, like, I actually think that I'd get Byron to do a lot more work where he's building confidence, doing, let's say, the 10s. And I think that would get Kian actually just getting his eye in with lower volume stuff, because I do feel that, say how heavy are you, Byron? Like 80, 90 or something. I do feel like something that I've experienced through training as a 117 kilo guy, training as a 100 kilo guy, training as a 90 kilo guy, training as an 85 kilo guy. I've noticed that these different body weights, that, say, my strategy would change, and optimal strategy would change. Like I'd be a lot more kind of sparing with the work done when I was heavier, because you don't want to go over that lip of, oh my goodness, I feel really fatigued now. Whereas you might actually find, like, as a lighter weight, and I've noticed that as I've got lighter, and when I'm say at my comp weight, if I compete under 80, under 90, like, I actually feel loads better the more work I do at, like, say, the specific comp distances. Like at my last couple of comps, people look at me like I'm weird, because I'm doing seemingly so much more work than anybody else in the warm-ups. But the truth is, like, I know my data, and I know that if I'm doing, say, 3 to 5 moderate sets in training, I know that the sets always get better as I go along. So yeah, like the overriding point is that take ownership, make notes of your individual performances, and see what's optimal for you. But be careful about, use the lighter weights, use the 30 to 50% range to dial in that technique and get your most ideal position on each day. And just be really, really careful at getting close to that 90% mark. So yeah, let's use the 300 kilo example. If I was going for 300 kilo, I would do 270 as my last warm up. I would do 240 as the one before that. Do 220 for a single, 200 for a single, maybe 170 for a triple, and then, like, quite a bit of work at the 120 to 140 range, like finding my optimal position. So let's move on to the next thing. So how best to approach different implements for carry events, random stuff like steel beams, for example, individual approach or adapt to the most similar familiar implement. So what would say for this, like specificity is key. So if you've got a competition, then I would definitely go and expose yourself to the, like say a medley, for instance. Like if it's a big competition, I would go and get that individual exposure to the event. So this is obviously going to be great from like an injury prevention perspective, like because you're building up that exposure to the obviously the specific implement that you need. So you see it when people get injured. Like a lot of injuries, like in strongman, in my opinion, come from like lack of preparedness, and it'll be like they've caught off guard, and like say, I feel sorry for Evan Singleton, poor guy. Like he popped his bicep the other day, but like with the anchor at the Giants live yard, and yeah, that's the thing with the awkward implement. So a lot of people say, like at World's Strongest Man, like, oh, should they be doing all these awkward implements, like because of the injury risk is high. But that's what the sport's about, isn't it? But the injury risk is high, in my opinion, because of the lack of exposure to the specific implement. So it is a bit of a tough one in terms of politics, like what you actually believe. But I would say definitely get the try and get as much exposure as you can to the specifics. If you're training in general, I would actually do the opposite, really, in terms of say for instance we're training a medley, and they could have anything that comes up in a comp. Yeah, it comes with risks. But just think practically, right? We're all busy, aren't we? We're all busy. We haven't got like loads of. We've all got other stuff going on apart from competing in strongman and training. So realistically, when we go to train, we want to be training as efficiently as possible. In terms of what I mean by that is, like, say, minimizing the setup time for everything. Like we're not going to be coming in like say a Monday night and you've been at work all day or whatever, and like you're not going to set up a 5 implement medley. Or if you do, like if you're training for an hour and a half to 2 hours, there's going to be an opportunity cost with that. By the time that you set up these 5 different implements, like it might take you half an hour, 40 minutes to do 2 or 3 working sets and then pack it away. And like, how much work could you have done in that time? Say for instance, if you were just picking, like, say one of the items, like say a sandbag, for instance. Like I'm a massive fan of a sandbag. I don't enjoy it personally training it, but it's just so practical because it's so practical, so safe, like relative to the other things. Like you go to the point of failure and you just drop it. Like going back to the concentric and fatigue, like you can push yourself to failure and then you can just drop it. Like using the 5 implement medley, doing 3 sets over the course of 40 minutes as an example. Like just imagine if you were doing, like, say, every minute on the minute with like a moderate weight sandbag, pick up and sprint 10 meters. Like how much work you could do in, like, you could do 40 sets of that in 40 minutes, and you could explore different hand positions, different bag setups, like one at an angle, one forward, one with the bag starting up and then flipping out to the side, shouldering one, like all these different variations that you can do to build up that kind of specific exposure to the well, that yeah, you say 40 sets is a lot, so sod that, but do 15 sets or 10 sets and then go and train something else. Like go and train something else that you want to work on, like rather than kind of like wasting all your time with set up stuff and that. But as you come to a more specific phase and you're like, right, well, I've got a keg coming up in comp and I've got this metal beam, like can you like it is definitely going to be worth going to get that exposure to the event. So yeah, and so what I would always do is work backwards. So go and test say if you can practically go and test the competition equipment, even if it's just once, because of logistics, and just have a feel of it. Like, say if it's like a metal beam there's only one in the country like designed like this, like go and have a feel for the technique. Go and speak to other people at the gym and say, oh, have you had a go on this? Like, have you got any hacks? Have you got any like who's good at this? Like what do they do? How do they pick it up? Where do they put the hands compared to the other stuff? Like try and pick up stuff off people who've been exposed to it a little bit more. And also just learn, right? Is it this is another good thing about strongman that a lot of people struggle with, is sometimes like you go to a comp and you might have your deadlift and it's 250 for reps. You might have your overhead and it's whatever, an axle, and you know what the weight is for reps. But then you might have like, say, something like, I don't know, like say a car deadlift or a truck pull. And realistically, you have no idea how heavy it's going to be and how heavy it's going to feel. So you've got to just get good. You've got to get good at high reps, low reps, heavy technique, how your technique changes as like on this continuum, if you will. So that's a thing that you could go and find out, like under these awkward implements. Like go and pick it up and then see roughly where it is on the continuum. Say, oh right, well actually, it's lighter than I anticipated. I can actually go into a sprint with this, and I can actually be a bit more reckless with the upper body positioning because I can hold it with my biceps. Or you might go and pick it up and you think, oh my goodness, like I need to be thinking about holding it low because I can't lift it up that high because my arms will be smoked. So I have to keep it low and almost like a deadlifty upper body position and focus on short strides. So because it's really, really heavy. But if you get this information from like the start, like you can plug this into your start of your training block, if you will, and think, right, well, actually I'm prepping for a heavy, awkward object to carry. And then you can kind of set your training up appropriately. So one more question, and then one more topic, and then I'll open it up to what you guys want to talk about for the last bit. So we'll change into a new, better technique for the long term, put you at a disadvantage in the short term as your body adjusts and builds strengths in new areas. And should you do that during a comp prep or wait until after? For example, deadlift form. So again, this is a tough question, really, because like realistically, everybody wants to answer and say, "Oh yeah, we should be looking to make better technique all the time. That should be the goal and the priority always." So, for a general population client, or say someone who trains strongman just for they like the movements just to keep fit, I would say that technique is the only thing that matters. And if you can progressively overload while within the constraints of holding like this beautiful technique on every single exercise, then that's great. Whereas as you move along the continuum and go to like say all you're bothered about is performance and actually say being as competitive as you possibly can be, what you'll actually find that if you, and I suppose I'm asking you guys here, I'm asking you a question here. Look at the last comp that you did, or last time you maxed out on, pick 3 lifts that you last maxed out on, and then analyze your positioning. Assuming that you've got technical proficiency in terms of bar path, because that as from a performance perspective, like bar path and where the object's moving is paramount, regardless of where you are in the continuum, whether you're just doing it to keep fit or whether you're going for performance. But assuming that the bar path is great, I want you to analyze your positions basically analyze your like say you maxing out, you're doing your max set at comp, your last few reps on the deadlift, for instance, how did they look? Like when you're going for the yoke, like the last few steps and a heavy yoke, like how did it look? And this is actually giving you information. This is actually a lot of people. This is in my opinion, it's showing you what your strongest positions are. So just think about that for a sec, and what do you think? Like, is there a reason that there's a reason you're going into these positions? Is because it's probably your strongest position. So does this always mean that your strongest position looks good? In a lot of cases, no. Like when you're maxing out, say. So in my opinion, what we need to do is like what I personally do and what's worked for me is actually looking at my strongest positions, and in a competition phase, I look to embrace these within the constraints of like prioritizing recovery. Recovery is the most important thing, because I don't go into these positions if I feel like I'm exposing myself. And I think exposing myself in terms of injury risk is actually more down to actually progressive principles in terms of your programming. So an example is like, say, for instance, you think about, say, manual, say jobs, like people who are bent over with a flex spine all day, like say builders and stuff like that. And a lot of these guys are, or like say farmers that are just lugging things around all day in this kind of flex position. And they've just built years and years and years of strength and resilience in that kind of position. So they're just so resilient in the let's use the rounded back as an example that people are scared of. They built so much resilience in that position that a lot of people would call suboptimal, if it was teaching somebody to deadlift. But the fact is that a lot of them may have never had pain, is because it's such a gradual exposure and build up in terms of the programming. So that's why, using that as an example, like I don't like I don't like saying somebody's got bad technique. I don't actually believe, like, anyway, going off on a tangent here, I suppose, but I think that what's worked for me, and use an example, like say I did a national comp earlier in the year, England's Strongest Man, and I was approaching the last 4 to 6 weeks of that, and it was like a 15-inch axle deadlift for the reps, and I knew that I could maybe get the comp weight for a single, maybe a double with a bit of a hitch, but like a single with really, really good technique, if you will, that people would think was nice and look pretty. Or I knew, like, obviously, because I take ownership and like I know my body more than anybody else, like I know that, say, I can go into what some people would say is suboptimal positions, and actually I knew that I built loads of resilience in there over time, and I knew that my injury risk was really, really low, like starting from that position. So I actually embraced this kind of purposeful hitch that some of you have probably seen, actually, and I ended up getting hitched the first rep, and it was really, really tough. But then I could just repeat it, and I got 6 reps out, and I finished, like, say, I accumulated more points than I would have done, and I ended up finishing second, and I got the runner-up overall national comp. And if I didn't do that, and if I'd have stuck to the kind of optimal technique principles, because I'd have been bothered about what other people thought, I wouldn't have been on the podium. I'd have been about 7th or 8th. It was really, really close that day. So yeah, that's a good example. But for me, that worked for me. But that was in a competition phase, and that was something that I really honed in on during the competition phase. So as soon as the competition phase finished, then what I focused on since, like, I haven't hitched since. Like, I've actually been focusing on building strength to, right, well, my strongest position is what I've described. Right, how can I make my strongest position look closer to what the textbook should be or more beautiful. And therefore, so for me, an ideal time to work on that is when you're coming away from the competition phase. So like I've got a great period of time at the minute, whereas if you say watch me deadlift at the minute, like every rep should be, or 99 reps out of 100 are going to be smooth all the way through, and like bar path's good, etc. No hitching. And then the stuff that I'm going to do in terms of assistance exercise will be to specifically strengthen that bit where I don't need to hitch as much. So next time I come to like a competition peak for a deadlift, like I'm going to be, my strongest position is going to be a little bit different. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me have a look at some of these comments. So, and what's a popular thing to do, right? Like I've used an example of, right, competition phase, just to use your strongest position, and then when you're not in competition phase or whatever, you off season, people call it, like just doing your kind of aiming to change your strongest position by using optimal, like say different variations, specific training specific muscle groups and stuff. But like say the phase in the middle or at any point really, like that would be what you, like say most of the time for strongman, like say I use this kind of, I'll talk about my phase because I can talk about it like objectively. I know it really well. Like say most of the time I'm somewhere in the middle of, that's the problem with strongman, isn't it? Like, well, not a problem, but like the difficult thing is like very often you're somewhere in the middle. Like people talk about off season or competition peak or whatever, but I've been like probably the last 2.5 years I've been like somewhere in the middle because I've been going from competition to competition. So where I've been like wanting to keep the specifics of actually the strengthening or embracing my strongest position on my lifts, but then actually doing some work because I can't wait for my off season because it might not come for a year, like to just work on the kind of imbalance stuff and that. So you kind of like what you'll find very popular in programming is like a nice blend where you'll be like, right, do your heavy work where you kind of going in your strength, you're strengthening your strongest position and getting your exposure to that, like say high percentages and getting the neural adaptations, etc. But then doing your specific assistance that's going to, I suppose, address the kind of like basically change this, change your strongest position over time. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, so last reps of comp get a little bit ugly, but as long as I don't injure myself, feel like it's all right. Keeping as close as possible to form, embracing, etc. Still though, interesting, but very obsessive about technique, almost sacrifice strength progress. So Byron has said that he sacrificed strength progress to focus on lighter weights and volume to perfect everything. So yeah, this is a beautiful kind of, what a lovely thing to say and believe. But I do believe that you're contradicting yourself there, because you've just said about your last competition that and this is where I feel a lot of people go wrong, and I feel like I've had better success in terms of injury prevention with coaching clients where I see the error where, in my opinion, where people are like, work on technique in training, technique's brilliant all the time. Yeah, that's a focus because I don't want to sacrifice. I don't want to go into those positions in training. And then at comp day, you kind of just turn a blind eye to it. And you just kind of pretend that, well, it's just comp day, like it just happened, or I need to just get a bit tighter on them or change. Whereas actually, you're almost in denial about it, because you just kind of, I suppose what I do with, like, I let my client decide what they're going to do. Right? Are you going to push yourself at that Are you like, how hard are you going to push yourself at your comp? And by the way, like as a coach, I never go to push anybody. Like I'll like say using Keane as an example, I'd say, all right, go like, oh yeah, Keane, you got your comp on Sunday, like, oh yeah, make sure you put 100% effort in and you go really hard. Like he's already doing that. I know he's gonna do that. It's like people are driven from within. Like they're not relying on me for the motivation. So because of this, I'll get a really good measure of like, right, well, actually, what like this is what it looks like in training. What's he actually doing in comp? Like, how hard is he pushing it? And like, he's got an extra 4 reps there on his deadlift that because he's like changed his technique and it's gone into a suboptimal position. And then we might discuss it afterwards and like have a laugh about it or whatever. And then I actually realized that he's going to go into that position at his next competition, like on his next deadlift for reps or his next kind of yoke for reps where his feet are going out to the side, his hips are opening up like a duck. Like, I'm not using Keane as an example, I'm just saying a general example. But like you go into that position. So my opinion is about, right, well, actually, this guy's or girl is going to go into that position. Am I not doing a disservice as a coach from a strength and conditioning perspective and a resilience development perspective if I don't prepare him or her for that position that he's inevitably going to go into? Like almost like a kind of, you can look at it as like a damage limitation thing. Like, are you going to be, and this is where we don't know the answer, but I'm just kind of putting my opinion across on this. So that obviously the jury's out. But are you going to be better kind of turning a blind eye, like focusing on your beautiful technique all the time and then just go to a comp and kind of turn a blind eye to it? It's comp day. We'll see what happens. I'll let my hip shoot up and my back round and my torso change under load because it's just comp day. It's just a one-off. Like, is that okay? Or are you putting yourself more at risk than, say, trying to think of I can't think of an example of somebody at the top. Like say, use Shannon Smith, for instance, right? She's really, really strong in position, in a flex position, right? If you watch her deadlift from the side, like a lot of people would just criticize them. But you look at the bar path, is immaculate on every single rep, right? And what she does so well is because she kind of knows that she's going to be pushing herself into that max position where she's going to be rounding, instead of trying to keep her flat back until she gets to the point where she can't keep it anymore and then gets mauled as she goes over that threshold. And then that's the bit that I worry about using the deadlift as an example, is like, say, where the back rounds under load as you take the weight off the floor and then you get pulled out of position. Like if using Shannon example, like she'll set up in a slightly more flex position, i.e. embracing the position that she's strong in. And as the weight check, you take a freeze frame of most of her work, like you take a freeze frame where the distance the bar is off the floor, like her torso angle will be the same. She's not getting pulled out of position. The back isn't rounding under load or rounding further under load. It's actually like that's the other side of the coin, is actually she's getting in this position that she's really strong in, and actually she's giving herself she's given herself an easier task to set up in a more solid position that she can maintain throughout the lift. What do you think about that, guys? Does that make any sense? Or which side of the fence would you be on? Would you be on the kind of just aim to have optimal technique, and then if it goes out of the window on the day because of the hype or because you're pushing yourself, like, do you think your exposure to injury risk is less because you're actually only spending a little bit of your training volume there? Or do you think you'll be less injury risk with actually just strategically exposing yourself to these positions over time. I'm interested to see what you think, guys. So, and also now throw in any questions that you've got about your own any like your training week or whatever. Just throw anything at me. So I'll just have a read of these last threats of calm. And by the way, Byron, I think being obsessive about technique and sacrificing strength progress to focus on light weights, I think that's fantastic, mate. I think that the longer that you can do that, the greater. And as long as you can the longer you can delay that gratification, the better. So someone like me, I think, similar to Chris in here, like I think me and Chris are quite similar. Like, even though logically we want to kind of over the course of time, we want to, just perfect technique and just gradually build up, work our weaknesses or whatever, and not compete for a while because we need to build this kind of base and be a better rounded athlete. Like, me and Chris kind of love competing because we love the buzz and we're used to playing sport every week, and like we love that buzz. We love that kind of, well, that self-gratification, really, that gratification of actually doing something good and doing something like magic on comp day that you feel good about, that gives you that kind of spur that reinforces what you do in training following it. So what I'm saying, Byron, is that I do, like, I envy that kind of that mantra, like, because I struggle with that. Like, I kind of need to set, if I'm doing a big phase, like, I need to give myself some like shorter term things. So, but yeah, I think it's great what you're doing, mate. Because like me, like using me as Chris an example, Chris has done brilliantly this year. He's absolutely amazing. He's won North England's. He wanted to win the King of the North, and he won England's Strongest Man 105, UK's 105. He won the Arnold's qualifier 105. He's doing OSG. We've gotten to actually back off a few of the other comps, because, like me, it's just very easy to just run yourself into the ground and just, like, get these opportunities that it's just too hard to turn down. So yeah, which can be great at one side because we're always up for it, but then, so again, like that's why it's just fascinating, like, chatting to you guys, because like we're all so different. And a big thing that I would say, like, with coaching methodology and what I preach, is take ownership. Like, everybody take ownership. Like, you know yourself better than any coach is going to know. So anyway, rambling. Someone who break perfect form in a deadlift, it makes more sense to start in a similar position to minimize the risk of injury. So yeah, Louise, this is my exact point, and I know this is something that you think about quite a lot, because we did a video the other week about it. But yeah, that's something that you need to. I hopefully I want to give my opinion on stuff, like, from a minimally biased position as possible, and I always want to give you, like, say, I just want to give you information either side, or like multidimensional, so you can all make your own decision. Because I cannot tell you what to think, right? Even the 4 or 5 guys that are listening here, like, all those principles that I've just talked about there, if you apply it to your specific context, they your answer might be different. I've talked about this before, like, so I'll just go through it quickly. But context is key, right? People say, "Oh, what's the best way to deadlift?" Use the deadlift as an example because that's what you're interested in, Louise. So, what's what's the optimal deadlift form? What's optimal deadlift form? And I've used an example of I've actually, like, say at points like say 4 years ago at my gym, I'd teach deadlift. There'd be people deadlifting, 10 people in a room, and I would be teaching 5 different methods. One would be the strongman competing, looking to go for a max and set a deadlift world record, for instance. In the same room, there'd be a power lifter. Technique completely different. In the same room, there'd be a weightlifter who are doing pulls to specifically strengthen their positions for weightlifting. Completely different again. And the general population client who wants to get as strong as possible, but they don't want to compete. They just want to get as strong as possible for life. And then number 5, we've got somebody who's coming back from injury. And the deadlift, like I'd have them all deadlift 100%. But using the strongman example, we'd be embracing the strongest position, whatever that may be. So it might be with a hitch. It might be a tactical hitch for the sake of getting a world record. With a powerlifter, there is never a justification behind hitching. That's where, like, say, we've got to agree that, well, we've got to respect the fact that strongman's new, isn't it? Like, people think, oh yeah, like it's new. We haven't got that much data on it. Powerlifting's been going a lot longer. Yeah, weightlifting has. So actually, like, say, people saying hitching is bad is actually coming from the context of, like, say, from who else is really, really good at deadlifting. Powerlifters are really good at deadlifting, so they feel like they're kind of can apply their context to strongmen, and, like, obviously demonize the hitch. Whereas actually, can you hitch with a really good bar path in a safe position? Possibly. Anyway, move on to the weightlifter. So the weightlifter wants to be almost like hyperextending their upper back, like super strong in their upper back, because they want to be at a position when the bar is at the knee, where the shoulders are over the bar, and they're, like, maximally loading that hip extension, ready to explode. So they want to be using they want to be locking that torso in, like, extended, using the back isometrically, just keeping it in position. If you won't see a weight, like, rounding at even the T-spine for a weightlifter, it is offering no value, even if it means they can lift more weight off the floor. It offers no value because it means that when they fully extended to do, like, a clean or a snatch or something, then they fully extended the hips, and then they've got to move, like, use their upper back muscles concentrically, which they don't want to do to finish off the lift. So their lift is going to be completely different. So with the general population client, you might have, like, say, you want to, their context is, like, they've got to be in the neutral spine. The bar path has got to be, like, straight, non-negotiable. It's got to be going up or ever so slightly back, non-negotiable. Their torso wants to be completely fixed and it wants to look the same as they initiate the pull and as they finish the lift. Non-negotiable. It doesn't want to move under load whatsoever. It wants to be within the range of neutral. So like, if you Google it or whatever, people describe neutral spine as a range. So yeah, find somewhere that doesn't hurt, and then practice a lot there within that range, and don't let yourself waver or go out of that position. Yeah. So, and then using the 5th example, we might have somebody who's coming back from injury, and they've got a hyperextension injury, where they've kind of, I don't know, it might be from doing overhead and they've felt like one of the, I don't know, they've arched the back too much and they've damaged the spine or whatever, or they've done it loading a stone and they've extended too high. So the deadlift that you might teach them is actually, you might encourage them a little bit more into flexion, because flexion might actually give them a little bit of relief of the symptoms of their injury, and then you might be coaching them to say not definitely not overextend at the top, because that's going to aggravate the back injury. But you might actually just coach them to just fully extend the hips and keep the shoulders in front of the bar. Like, anyway, I've explained 5 different ways there that it's just context dependent, and hopefully you can see that it can't be a one size fits all. So you guys, even though that we all compete in strongman, like you've got to account for your context. Right, needed to be my views and goals. The form might be linked with relatively inexperience. Probably only got correct form down to last year or so. Yeah, but Byron, same thing, mate. Like, I just say keep that going for as long as you can. Like, get another few years in, just with the same kind of approach, and just make sure you're enjoying it. And if you get to the point where you get a bit stale or whatever, like, then enter a few more comps and maybe push yourself a bit more in terms of certain lifts, explore these strongest positions or whatever. But the more work that you put, this is a good way of putting it, Byron, the more work that you put in to that bank account, the more likely when you want to cash out and take money out of the bank account, that your strongest position is going to be somewhere near what you might see as optimal. So hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, and also this is another point. So what you started to compete, you might need to start changing your mindset on things. Part of the reason you're in this group. So yeah, but you need to gather all the information. You need to gather the information from me, from the other guys in the group, people who compete, people who you're inspired by, people. But don't get dragged into somebody else's like kind of narrative, or don't think that like you should, like, you're going to compete because you think it'd be cool because somebody else will think it's good, or like you've got to just always develop your own philosophy and make sure that you just take a step back, blank everybody out, and if there was nobody else, would you still be doing that? Like, because I've actually, I suppose I'll be honest, like I've coached some people where I maybe can think of examples like 6 or 7 years ago where I coached people who are really, really strong in the gym. And because they were strong in the gym, I'd almost like push them and steer them and coerce them into competing. And it wasn't right for them. Like, they were absolute animal in the gym, what they were lifting, but they came to that competition setting and it just took the enjoyment out, and it triggered like anxiety, and like they didn't enjoy training the last few weeks in the comp. So in the approach to the comp. So yeah, just make sure that you do that. You're taking it at your own pace, and you're doing it for the right. You're doing it for the right reasons. You're doing it for yourself, and always stay true to your philosophy, and don't let anybody change that, I suppose. So, are there any more questions that I have missed? Oh, sorry. Combat and change of rack position for overhead when adding sleeves, so moves off the shoulders. So, great question. In fact, I'll start another video. This is really good. So, changing your rack position when adding sleeves. So, again, this is a thing that I would aim to do in different phases. So, say, assuming that you're not going to compete for a bit, like I would do like a phase where you do it without sleeves, because the advantage, because it almost look at it like a continuum where, say, if you go sleeveless, you're gonna find it easier generally to find, especially with axle and log, to find a good rack position where you feel connected to the torso, i.e., the thing that's going to produce the magic and drive the force into the bar. But you're going to get less assistance because you don't have that spring from the sleeve. You go to the other end of the continuum and you go to like a triple ply sleeve, for instance, where you're going to get loads of spring if you get your timing right, but it's almost kind of creating this disconnect of the rack position where, like, you see people, like, say, imagine people racking an axle up here with the kind of triple ply sleeves, and they just can't get that they can't get the bar or the object down to the torso. So it does become difficult there to, like, the further it is away, obviously this kind of, what is it, a lever or whatever, the further the object is to from the thing actually producing force, i.e., the hit, the more power leakage. So the lower that we can keep down and the more connected, the better the transfer of power that you're putting in with the hips and the lower body is actually going to go into actually having an effect on the object. So that's the kind of that's the thing that changes with sleeves. So you might actually find that as you transition between phases, like I'm just talking like I don't think anybody actually trains like this, to be honest, because of all the different things that we have to account for. But if you think of this like, say, 12-week training block where you could do 4 weeks without sleeves, the last 4 weeks with your competition sleeves, say triple ply, double ply, and then the bit in the middle you might do with some neoprene ones where you're just introducing a little bit of support, but it's not stealing your rack position as much as these triple plies. But so taking this beautiful, perfect phase that nobody ever does, you could you actually link that within like a training week, or like, say, could you do, going back to say the undulating approach, could you do one session with these sleeves where you're focusing on developing that rack and building that connection? Then you do like the next session with your like thicker sleeves where you're focusing on like producing as much power with the kind of from the elbow, and that helping you, and then using the other session to go somewhere in the middle. Like, they're all going to give you value and benefits. Like, say, for instance, but that's the value you're going to get from the sleeveless session is going to be is actually building that connection of feeling connected with the bar, because you can't rely on the sleeve to produce the power. So you're having to use something else, because your arms aren't in a good position to produce force up. So it can actually be a really, really good way of, learning leg drive might be a really good way to, learning your push presses and jerks and stuff. But then as you get closer to comp, add it, sprinkling the sleeves in. I think another thing, a massive thing where people go wrong is I'll see people when they treat themselves to, like, say, a new pair of, like, say, a pair of thick sleeves, and they're going to save it till comp day to actually use them, and then they get caught out because the rack position changes. So I would say that combating the change of rack position for overhead, I would say just practice sleeveless, maybe with a neoprene and maybe with a thicker sleeve, and do all your variations and just notice what changes, what's different on each lift. I'll just give you a really quick summary of what I think. Like, say, axle, your press is going to feel easier with the thicker sleeve, but as you go to a thicker sleeve, the clean is going to feel significantly more difficult. So you need to find out where what's the trade-off. Like, do I need an easier clean? Do I need a, like, say, more on the press? Like, and it's not always an easy question to answer. For example, last time I did axle for reps, I actually went sleeveless for the first time, and it was okay. I think I hit like 120 for 4 at the under 80s comp, without sleeves, and the rack position just felt amazing. Oh, the reason why I did it was because as I was getting close to comp, I was struggling. I was like failing the clean. So, or failing the clean deeper into the set. So because I obviously tested this myself, like I was looking at ways that I could kind of help me with that. And the jerk and the press felt harder, but it was worth that trade-off for me at that time. Whereas when I did it earlier in the year, I did 120 for 4 or 5 again at the under 105 qualifier. I did it with my neoprene sleeves. Whereas if I was doing like say a max from the rack, I'd wear like the triple ply sleeves or like say a Viking press or something. But yeah, it's that kind of you just got to work it out on each individual lift, and again it changes for you and your strengths and your body makeup. So log, so again you're gonna find that it's almost pushing you forward with a log because of the log rolling. Mitchell Hooper, what did he do? Failed 200 at the, got very close with the 200 kilo at the Shore Classic, and but he says that he thinks that he missed that because he was wearing the triple ply sleeves that he doesn't wear now, and he could feel that in the rack he was having to, that like the sleeves were pushing him forward, and he was actually actively having to push back into them. So obviously he's getting like plenty of tension there, but is the tension going in the right direction? Whereas you go for like a dumbbell, for instance, and I actually find that personally, that I'm not a massive fan of doing it without sleeves because it just changes the rack position to, like I actually feel having like for me and my weight and my body makeup, like actually having like just a little bit of tension here at the elbow just puts me, otherwise my arm drops right here, and then I'm having to keep the same rack position. I'm having to keep this arm up like that. So like I'm obviously a massive advocate of making the arm redundant and making the arm relaxed. So if I relax the arms without sleeves, the dumbbell will drop down here. So it doesn't feel quite as good to when I keep the arm relaxed with a neoprene or an elbow slip or like a thicker one. Like the relaxed arm stays here, which if you think the dumbbell handle will be a little bit here. So in the case of the dumbbell, I actually find it, better with the sleeves, in terms of finding the optimal rack position, which is very different to like axle, barbell, and dumbbell. Axle, barbell, and log. Brilliant. Right, we'll end it there. So I've gone obviously a little bit over. Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for your contribution. Really enjoyed having you there. I actually feel like I'm conversing and talking to you rather than just talking to a camera. So brilliant. Thank you very much. Hopefully you've got plenty of value there.